Ethan, an 8-year-old boy with a strong moral compass, always believed in standing up for those he loved, no matter how difficult it might be. One day, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his father's life, Ethan made a decision that changed everything. As he watched his dad about to marry Emily, a woman hiding dark secrets, Ethan stepped forward and revealed a shocking truth no one could have seen coming. His bold move brought the wedding to a halt. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Why did Ethan's revelation lead to such dramatic consequences? How did this young boy's bravery expose the truth about his father's fiancée? And what ripple effects did it have on all their lives? Stay with us to find out. And before we dive deeper, let us know where you're watching from and whether this story of courage and honesty resonates with you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the small chapel, casting a warm glow over the guests. The air buzzed with anticipation as family and friends whispered to one another, their eyes darting toward the entrance. At the altar, David Matthews stood tall in a crisp black tuxedo, a nervous smile on his face as he waited for his bride. "You look great, Dad," whispered 8-year-old Ethan, fidgeting with the small ring pillow in his hands. His dark curls were neatly combed, and his tiny suit matched his father's perfectly. But while David was beaming with joy, Ethan's brown eyes were filled with concern. David glanced down at his son and gave him a reassuring wink. "Thanks, buddy. You're the best ring bearer a dad could ask for." He affectionately ruffled Ethan's hair, unaware of the anxiety etched into the boy's expression. As the first notes of the wedding march began, the congregation rose to their feet. All eyes turned to the chapel doors, eager to catch a glimpse of the bride, except Ethan's. His gaze remained fixed on his father, his small hands clutching the pillow so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The doors swung open, revealing Emily in all her bridal glory. She moved down the aisle like a vision in white lace and silk, her golden hair cascading in soft waves, her blue eyes glistening with emotion. David's face lit up with adoration. "You look beautiful," David whispered as Emily joined him at the altar. She smiled softly. "I can't wait to start our life together." The officiant began the ceremony, his words blending into the background as Ethan struggled to focus. Each passing moment felt like an eternity. He shifted his weight anxiously, glancing between his father and Emily. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like he was simply nervous. But there was something deeper, something urgent, beneath his fidgeting. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the moment he first met Emily. It had been a crisp autumn afternoon when David picked him up from school, grinning ear to ear. "I've got someone special I want you to meet, buddy," he had said excitedly as they drove home. Emily had been waiting on the porch, her golden hair catching the light of the setting sun. She smiled warmly, and David's eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "Ethan, this is Emily," David said proudly. "She's very special to me, and I hope she'll be special to you, too." Emily crouched down to Ethan's level. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Ethan," she said gently. "Your dad talks about you all the time." At that moment, Ethan had felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But as the weeks passed, that hope began to fade. Ethan started noticing how different Emily was when his father wasn't around. The warm smiles disappeared, replaced with cold glares and curt tones. One evening in particular stood out in his memory. David had been working late, and Emily was supposed to watch him. As they sat at the table, Ethan tried to make conversation. "Miss Emily," he said cautiously, "do you like space? We're learning about the solar system at school, and—" "Ethan," she interrupted sharply without even looking up from her phone. "I'm busy. Eat quietly, please." Ethan shrank into his chair, silently pushing food around on his plate. The silence that followed was heavy. But when David was home, it was like flipping a switch. Emily was cheerful, affectionate, and curious about Ethan's day. She'd laugh at his jokes, ruffle his hair, and act like the perfect soon-to-be stepmom. Ethan, however, saw through it. The forced smiles, the strain behind her eyes. David, on the other hand, had never seemed happier. He floated around the house, humming, breaking into goofy little dances that would normally embarrass Ethan but now made him smile. "Isn't Emily wonderful?" he would say, eyes twinkling. "We're so lucky to have her, aren't we, buddy?" Ethan would nod and force a smile, not wanting to crush his dad's joy. But inside, he felt more isolated and confused with each passing day. As time went on, Emily's true colors showed more clearly. She started making snide comments when David wasn't around. "Oh, Ethan," she'd say with a sigh after seeing his school project mess, "you're such a handful. I don't know how your father puts up with it." Or when he proudly showed her a test score, "That's nice, dear, but there's always room for improvement." Each remark chipped away at Ethan's confidence, making him feel like an unwanted guest in his own home. He started retreating more into his room, avoiding common spaces and conversations. Then came the moment Ethan would never forget. One Saturday afternoon, about 3 months before the wedding, David went out to run errands, leaving Ethan alone with Emily. He was in the living room, watching cartoons and sipping juice, when she walked in. "Turn that off," she snapped, pointing at the TV. "It's too loud. I'm trying to work." Startled, Ethan fumbled for the remote. In his hurry, he knocked over his glass, spilling juice all over the table and carpet. "I'm sorry," he cried, jumping up to grab some napkins. "I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, Emily stormed over, grabbing his arm roughly and yanking him away from the mess. "Look what you've done," she hissed, her face twisted in anger. "You clumsy little boy." Ethan winced at her grip, tears springing to his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whimpered. "I'll clean it up, I promise." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare say a word," Emily snarled. "If you breathe a single word of this to your father, you'll be very, very sorry. Do you understand me?" Ethan nodded quickly, his heart pounding like a drum. As soon as she let go of his arm, he rushed to clean up the spilled juice, his hands trembling the whole time. That night, when David came home, Emily greeted him with a kiss and a cheerful, "How was your day, honey?" From the stairs, Ethan silently rubbed his sore arm, feeling more isolated than ever. As the wedding drew closer, Ethan struggled under the weight of his secret. He desperately wanted to tell his father what Emily was really like, but fear kept him silent. What if his dad didn't believe him? What if telling made things even worse? One evening, about a month before the wedding, Ethan finally found the courage to speak up. David was in his study, sorting through paperwork, when Ethan knocked softly on the door. "Come in, buddy," David called, smiling as Ethan stepped inside. "What's up?" Ethan hesitated, nervously twisting the hem of his shirt. "Dad, can I talk to you about something?" David set his papers aside and gave Ethan his full attention. "Of course, son. You can tell me anything." Taking a deep breath, Ethan blurted, "It's about Emily. I don't think she likes me very much." David frowned, confused. "What do you mean? Emily adores you." "No, Dad, she doesn't," Ethan said quickly. "She acts totally different when you're not around. She ignores me. Sometimes she says really mean things and—" "Whoa, slow down," David interrupted, raising a hand. He let out a sigh, brushing a hand through his hair. "Ethan, I know this is a big change. It's normal to feel uneasy when someone new joins the family, but I promise you, Emily cares about you." "But Dad," Ethan tried again, only for David to shake his head. "No buts. Emily's going to be your stepmom, and I need you to give her a chance. She's doing her best, just like we all are." "Okay." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Okay, Dad," he mumbled, turning to leave. "Hey," David called gently. "I love you, kiddo. We're going to be just fine. You'll see." As Ethan closed the door behind him, hopelessness washed over him. The one person he trusted most hadn't believed him, or worse, didn't want to. From that moment on, Ethan stopped trying to warn his dad. He withdrew more, becoming quiet and reserved, dreading family meals and outings where he had to pretend everything was fine. David, lost in the whirlwind of wedding plans and his own joy, didn't notice the change in his son. He chalked it up to shyness, never suspecting the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface. Emily, sensing her advantage, grew bolder. Her jabs became more cutting, her glares colder. One afternoon, Ethan overheard a conversation that shook him deeply. Emily's friend Sarah had stopped by. From the hallway, Ethan heard Sarah say, "I don't know how you do it, playing mom to someone else's kid. I couldn't." "Oh, it's not so bad," Emily replied, her voice syrupy sweet. "Ethan's part of the package. You have to take the good with the bad." Sarah laughed. "You're a saint. If it were me, I'd have sent the kid off to boarding school already." Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He tiptoed back to his room, the words "part of the package," the bad echoing in his head. Was that really how Emily saw him? Just an obstacle? As the big day approached, he felt more trapped than ever. Every conversation about honeymoon plans or house renovations made him feel invisible, like a ghost in his own home. One sleepless night, Ethan crept downstairs to get a glass of water. As he passed the living room, he froze. Emily's voice, angry and hushed, drifted toward him. "Mark, you need to listen to me," she hissed into her phone. Ethan crouched and peeked around the corner. Emily paced, running her hand through her disheveled blonde hair. "We can't rush this. Everything has to be perfect. The wedding's in 2 weeks. After that, we move to phase 2. The insurance policy. David doesn't suspect a thing." Ethan's heart raced. Insurance? Phase 2? He couldn't make sense of it. "Just stick to the plan," Emily snapped. "Once we get the money, we're done. No more scams, no more close calls. This is our ticket out." "Scams? Money?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "That brat Ethan is the wild card," Emily growled. "He sees too much. But I'll handle him. David's completely hooked. He'd never believe anything bad about me." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes. He always knew Emily disliked him, but hearing it out loud was something else entirely. 2 weeks after the wedding, we strike. David won't know what hit him." Emily ended the call. Ethan scrambled back to his room, heart pounding. He dove under the covers, mind reeling. Whatever Emily and this Mark were planning, it involved money, lies, and hurting his dad. The next morning, Ethan sat at breakfast, exhausted. "Morning, champ," David said, ruffling his hair. "Rough night?" Ethan nodded. "Couldn't sleep." "Oh, poor thing," Emily cooed, her voice falsely sweet. "Probably too excited about the wedding, huh?" Ethan glanced at her. Behind her smile, he saw something cold, something dangerous. "Yeah," he lied. "Excited." Over the next few days, he became more observant. Emily was always texting someone labeled M on her phone. She'd say it was the wedding planner or bridesmaid drama, but Ethan wasn't fooled. She was gone from the house more often too, giving vague reasons for her absences. Then came the discovery that confirmed everything. David had gone to a meeting. Emily was out. Ethan, alone, tried to access her laptop. After several failed attempts, he noticed a sticky note tucked beneath it, a series of numbers and letters. He typed them in. The laptop unlocked. Inside were documents, David's schedule, insurance paperwork. One file titled Insurance Policy showed a payout of $5 million in case of accidental death. In a folder labeled Mark, Ethan found photos. Emily and a man with dark hair and a scar, together, smiling like a couple. Ethan's stomach turned. Suddenly, Emily's car pulled into the driveway. In a panic, Ethan shut down the computer and returned everything to its place. When she called out, he responded calmly, "Just doing homework." Emily appeared in the doorway, eyeing him suspiciously. "Don't you usually work in your room?" "It's quieter here," he lied. That night, Ethan lay in bed with one truth echoing in his mind. He had to stop this wedding. No matter what. Back in the chapel, as the officiant recited the familiar words, "If anyone knows just cause why these two should not be joined," Ethan's chest tightened. This was his moment. "Wait!" he cried out. Gasps rippled through the guests. David turned, concerned. Ethan. Ethan trembled, but found his voice. You can't marry her. She's not who you think she is. Emily's eyes blazed with fury. David knelt down. What do you mean? She's been lying to you. She's planning something terrible. The room went still. Emily forced a laugh. He's just scared. It's a big change. No. Ethan shouted. I heard you on the phone. I saw the insurance policy. I saw pictures of you with Mark. You're not just working with him. You're with him. And you're going to hurt Dad. The crowd erupted in murmurs. David's face turned pale. Emily's voice grew shrill. That's insane. Mark is my wedding planner. Ethan held firm. It's not true. I saw everything on your computer. I'm not lying. David turned to Emily, his voice low. Is there any truth to what he's saying? Emily's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the chapel, her mask slipping. Then, coldly, she snapped, This is ridiculous. I don't have to stand here and be insulted by a jealous little brat. She turned to the stunned guests. Clearly, Ethan needs help. David, maybe we should postpone, Emily began. But David cut her off, his voice calm but firm. No, Emily. I think we need to deal with this right now. Because if there's even the slightest truth to what Ethan's saying. Emily's eyes flashed with fury. You can't be serious. You're really going to believe the wild imagination of an 8-year-old over me? Your fiancée? The woman you love? David's expression was conflicted, but steady. I love my son too, Emily. And Ethan has never lied to me. Not once. He's not the type to make up stories, especially not something this serious. Ethan felt a wave of relief crash over him. His dad was finally listening. But Emily wasn't finished. This is ridiculous, she snapped, her voice rising. All I've ever done is love you, David. I've tried so hard to be a mother to Ethan, and this is how I'm repaid? With wild accusations and suspicion. She turned sharply to Ethan, her eyes blazing. You little brat, she hissed, forgetting herself. You've ruined everything. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. David's eyes widened in shock. In that single moment, he saw a side of Emily he'd never seen before, and it chilled him to his core. Emily, he said, barely above a whisper, what have you done? Realizing her outburst, Emily forced an awkward laugh and quickly backpedaled. David, it's just the stress. This whole day, everything, it's too much. Ethan's outburst, these accusations. I lost my temper. You understand, right? But the damage had already been done. David stepped back slowly, his gaze locked on hers. No, he said, his voice steady. I don't think I do understand. Because the woman I thought I was going to marry would never speak to my son that way, no matter how upset she was. He turned to Ethan, kneeling in front of him. Ethan, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. With all eyes on him, Ethan began to speak. He told David about the way Emily treated him when they were alone. The coldness, the cutting remarks, the threats. He described the phone call he'd overheard, the suspicious absences, the secret texts. He explained how he had found the insurance policy and the photos of her and Mark. As Ethan spoke, David's face grew paler with every word. The guests listened in stunned silence, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others nodding as though long-suspected pieces were finally clicking into place. Emily, standing frozen, darted her eyes between David and the exit. Her calm facade was gone, completely shattered. Emily, David said, his voice filled with sorrow, is any of this true? Look me in the eye and tell me none of it's real. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes, once full of feigned warmth, were now icy and calculating. David saw the truth, and it broke his heart. I think, he said, his voice trembling slightly, this wedding is over. The church erupted in stunned commotion. Guests stood up, some heading toward the doors, others inching closer to hear what was happening. Emily saw her chance. With a cry of frustration, She turned and bolted down the aisle, her white dress flowing behind her like a ghost. She shoved past stunned guests and burst through the church doors into the sunlight. "Stop her!" someone shouted. But Emily was fast. She disappeared outside, leaving behind a trail of shock and confusion. David, still reeling, snapped into action. His hands shaking, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yes, hello," he said, voice trembling. "My fiancée, she was planning to kill me for insurance money. She just ran out of our wedding. Please, you have to find her." As David gave the dispatcher a description and explained the situation, Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had done it. He had saved his father, but at what cost? The joyful hush that had once filled the church was now replaced with buzzing whispers, gasps, and speculation. Some guests ran outside to try and glimpse the fleeing bride. Others huddled together, talking in low, hurried voices. David hung up the call and turned to his son. His face was a mixture of shock, regret, and gratitude. Kneeling, he placed his hands on Ethan's shoulders. "Ethan," he said, voice raw with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have seen it." Ethan threw his arms around his dad's neck, burying his face in his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered. "I'm just glad you're safe." David held his son tightly, tears filling his eyes. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Just the two of them, father and son, finally together, finally safe. That peace was soon broken by the arrival of the police. 2 officers entered the church, commanding immediate attention. The guests fell silent. "Mr. Matthews?" one officer asked, approaching them. "Yes," David replied, standing and keeping a hand protectively on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm Officer Johnson. This is Officer Rivera. We need to ask you a few questions about what happened." David nodded. "Of course. Whatever you need." "Ethan," Officer Johnson said gently, "are you okay to come with us to the station to help?" Ethan nodded bravely. "Yeah, I want to help." As they prepared to leave, David's best man, Jack, approached. "Dave," he said, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "What do you want us to do?" David looked around the chaotic church. I don't know. Just tell everyone to go home. Apologize for me. I can't deal with this right now." Jack nodded. "I've got it. You just focus on Ethan." "Thanks, Jack," David said, managing a faint, grateful smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you." As David and Ethan walked out with the officers, they heard Jack calmly addressing the guests, asking them to head home and explaining what had happened. The ride to the police station felt surreal. Ethan stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of his hometown blur past. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. At the station, they were taken to a quiet room. Officer Johnson explained that it wasn't an interrogation, just a space where they could speak in private. For the next few hours, David and Ethan told their story, everything. Ethan described the overheard calls, Emily's threats, the photos, and the insurance documents. David, still in disbelief, filled in the gaps, trying to recall the moment things started to go wrong. He remembered how Emily had insisted on increasing his life insurance policy just a month after their engagement, how she framed it as being for Ethan's future. He also recalled her pushing him to take up extreme activities, skydiving, rock climbing, even swimming with sharks on their honeymoon. "I thought she was just adventurous," David murmured, voice hollow. "I never imagined." Ethan reached across the table and held his father's hand. David looked at him and smiled faintly, grateful for his son's strength. Later that day, more information came in. Officer Rivera had caught Mark just a few blocks from the church. Under questioning, Mark confessed everything. Emily wasn't even her real name. She was actually Sarah Connor, a seasoned con artist with a history of seducing wealthy men, scamming them, and vanishing. Mark was her longtime partner, both in crime and in life. They had pulled scams before, but nothing this dangerous. The insurance policy was just the start. Sarah had slowly been isolating David, manipulating him into changing his will and securing everything in her name. Their plan was to stage a tragic accident during the honeymoon, claim the life insurance, and disappear. As the full truth unfolded, David seemed to sink into himself. How did I not see it?" he whispered. "How could I have been so blind?" Officer Johnson looked up from his notes. "Mr. Matthews, don't blame yourself. These people are professionals. They know how to manipulate and deceive. The important thing is, they didn't succeed. Thanks to your son." David looked at Ethan, pride and guilt flickering in his eyes. "You're right," he said softly. "Ethan saved my life today." "I just wish I had listened to him sooner," David murmured. Ethan, feeling a surge of affection for his father, leaned into his side. "It's okay, Dad. We're okay now." As the day turned to evening, there was still no sign of Emily. It was as if she had vanished into thin air after fleeing the church. The police reassured David and Ethan that they were doing all they could to find her, but they also warned that Emily had experienced disappearing without a trace. "We've issued an APB and alerted all local and state authorities," Officer Johnson explained. "We're also monitoring airports, bus terminals, and rental agencies. But I have to be honest with you, she had a head start, and she knows how to stay hidden." David nodded tiredly. "I understand. Thank you for everything you're doing." As they prepared to leave the station, Officer Johnson handed David his card. "If you remember anything else, or if Ms. Connor tries to contact you, call me. Anytime, day or night." David slipped the card into his pocket and turned to Ethan. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Ethan nodded. Now that the adrenaline had worn off, the exhaustion hit him all at once. He was completely drained, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The drive home was quiet. Both father and son were lost in their own thoughts. When they finally pulled into the driveway, David turned off the engine but didn't get out of the car. "Ethan," he said softly, turning toward his son, "I owe you a big apology." Ethan looked at him, surprised. "For what, Dad?" David let out a heavy sigh. "For not listening to you. For not seeing how she was treating you. For bringing that woman into our lives and putting you in danger." Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, with a maturity far beyond his age, he said, "Dad, you were just trying to be happy. Trying to make us both happy. You couldn't have known what Emily was really like." David's eyes filled with tears. "But I should have noticed. I should have seen that you weren't okay." Ethan reached out and took his father's hand. "I didn't want to ruin it for you. You looked so happy with her. I thought, maybe I was the problem." David's heart shattered at his son's words. He reached over and pulled Ethan into a fierce hug, ignoring the awkwardness of the car seats. "No, Ethan. Never. You could never be the problem. You're the best thing in my life. And I'm so sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as the emotions of the past few months finally poured out. It was a release, an emotional reset they both desperately needed. Eventually, David pulled back and wiped his eyes. "What do you say we go inside and order a ridiculous amount of pizza? I think we've earned it." Ethan managed a small smile. "Can we get stuffed crust?" David laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "After today, you can have any kind of pizza you want." As they walked into the house, a sense of peace settled over them. The threat of Emily, Sarah, still lingered, but they would face whatever came next together. For now, they were safe. They were home. And most importantly, they had each other. In the weeks that followed, their lives were anything but calm. There were more police interviews, meetings with lawyers to untangle the web of lies Emily had spun, and countless phone calls from friends, family, and even reporters wanting to know what had happened. David did his best to shield Ethan from the worst of it, but some things were unavoidable. Emily remained on the run, vanishing without a trace. The police continued to update David, but as the days turned into weeks, the likelihood of finding her grew slimmer. Mark, on the other hand, was in custody and facing serious charges. In exchange for a lighter sentence, He provided extensive details about Emily's history, revealing a years-long trail of scams, deception, and emotional manipulation that had left numerous victims in her wake. For Ethan, the aftermath was a complicated blend of relief and lingering fear. While he was grateful his father was safe and Emily was out of their lives, he couldn't help but worry she might return someday for revenge. David recognized his son's anxiety and took steps to reassure him. He had a top-tier security system installed, complete with cameras and motion sensors, and constantly reminded Ethan that he could come to him with anything, no matter how small. "We're a team," he would say, ruffling Ethan's hair. "You and me against the world, remember?" Ethan would nod, feeling just a little safer every time his father said it. Slowly, life began to find a rhythm again. David threw himself into his work, taking on more projects to keep his mind busy. Ethan focused on school, finding comfort in the normalcy of homework and classes. One Saturday morning, about a month after the wedding that never was, David and Ethan were sitting at the breakfast table when the doorbell rang. David tensed for a moment, still on edge from all that had happened. But when he looked through the peephole, he relaxed. It was Jack, his best man and longtime friend. "Hey, man," Jack said as David opened the door. "How are you two holding up?" David gave a tired but genuine smile. "We're getting there. Come on in." Jack followed him into the kitchen, where Ethan was finishing his cereal. "Hey, little man," Jack greeted, giving Ethan a fist bump. Ethan returned it with a small smile. He had always liked Jack. He treated him like an equal, not just a kid. "So," Jack said, accepting a cup of coffee from David, "I actually came by with an idea. The guys and I have been talking. We think it's time you two got out of the house for a bit." David raised an eyebrow. "I don't know, Jack. After everything that's happened." "That's exactly why you need this," Jack insisted. "Just a couple of days away. No phones, no press, no legal stuff. Just the guys, some tents, and the great outdoors." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Can we go fishing?" Jack grinned. "You bet, buddy. We'll catch enough fish to feed an army." David looked at his son. Really looked at him. For the first time in weeks, Ethan's eyes were sparkling with genuine excitement. And for a moment, things felt almost normal. David looked at his son's hopeful face and felt something ease in his chest. Maybe this was exactly what they both needed. A moment to breathe, to remember life before Emily came into their world. "All right," he said with a smile, watching Ethan's face light up. "Let's do it." The camping trip turned out to be just what they needed. Away from the constant reminders of Emily's betrayal, David and Ethan were finally able to relax. They spent their days hiking, fishing, and telling stories around the fire. Ethan was thrilled to learn how to pitch a tent and roast the perfect marshmallow, while David rediscovered the joy of simply watching his son laugh, carefree and unburdened. On their final night in the woods, as the campfire crackled to glowing embers, David pulled Ethan close. "Thank you, buddy," he said quietly. Ethan looked up at him, confused. "For what, Dad?" David's eyes reflected the soft firelight as he smiled. "For being you. For being brave when I wasn't. For saving us both." Ethan snuggled in closer. "We saved each other, Dad." The next day, as they drove home, both father and son felt renewed. Emily's shadow still lingered, but it no longer held power over them. They had survived the storm, together, and emerged stronger. Life moved on. Ethan began a new school year, throwing himself into his studies and making new friends. David, with encouragement from his therapist, cautiously dipped back into dating. He was still guarded, but slowly healing. Then, 6 months after the wedding that never was, everything changed again. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Officer Johnson appeared at their door, his face somber. "Mr. Matthews," he said as David welcomed him in, "we found Emily." David's heart leapt. "You've arrested her?" Officer Johnson shook his head. "No, sir. I'm sorry. We found her body in a motel room just outside Las Vegas. It appears she took her own life." The words hit David like a punch to the chest. He staggered back, steadying himself against the wall. "She's dead," he whispered. "Yes," the officer confirmed gently. "She'd been there for a few days. There was a note." Just then, Ethan came bounding down the stairs and stopped short at the sight of the officer. "Dad?" he asked, his voice small and worried. David turned to him, pale and shaken. "Ethan, buddy, why don't you go to your room for a bit? I need to talk to Officer Johnson." Ethan hesitated, his eyes flicking between them. "Is it about Emily?" David sighed. "Yes. But come here, we'll talk about it together." They sat together in the living room as Officer Johnson carefully explained the situation, choosing his words with care to protect Ethan from the worst of it. Emily, real name Sarah Connor, had been on the run for months. But in her final note, she expressed remorse, saying she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. David sat in stunned silence, his arm around Ethan. The boy looked up at him with concern. "Are you okay, Dad?" "I don't know," David admitted with a faint smile. "It's a lot to take in." After Officer Johnson left, promising to keep them informed, David and Ethan remained on the couch, quiet. Then Ethan asked, "Do you think she really felt bad for what she did?" David ran a hand through his hair. "Maybe. People are complicated, buddy. Sometimes they do terrible things and only realize too late how wrong they were. What matters is that we move forward, and we keep learning." Emily's death brought a strange sense of closure, but it also reopened wounds that took time to heal. David and Ethan began attending counseling together, learning to process the complex emotions that came with the end of their ordeal. They used the experience to grow even closer. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. David focused on being the best father he could be. He reached out to old friends, reconnecting with those he'd pushed away during his relationship with Emily. Ethan, now free from fear and secrets, blossomed. He became more outgoing, more confident, and dove into his schoolwork. He developed a love for detective stories and often joked that he had a head start in solving mysteries. On the one-year anniversary of the day the wedding fell apart, David and Ethan began a new tradition. They packed a picnic and drove to a scenic state park. They spent the day hiking, fishing, and enjoying nature together. As they sat beside a clear lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, David turned to his son. "You know, Ethan," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened." Ethan glanced up. "Yay." David nodded, his eyes warm with emotion. "What Emily did was horrible. But in a strange way, it taught me the most important lesson of my life." "What's that?" Ethan asked curiously. David reached over and gently poked Ethan in the chest. "That the most important relationship in my life, the one I should always prioritize, is right here. You and me, buddy. We're a team. Always." Ethan beamed and threw his arms around his father in a tight hug. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo," David replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than you'll ever know." As they packed up their things and drove home, a sense of peace settled over them. The past year had been filled with betrayal, fear, and uncertainty, but it had also forged a bond between them that was unbreakable. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger. The story of the young boy who stopped his father's wedding had become something greater, a story of resilience, of love, and of the enduring power of family. It was a reminder that true strength doesn't always come from grand gestures or fairy tale endings. Sometimes, it comes from quiet bravery, from speaking the truth, and from standing up for the people you love. As they pulled into the driveway, David glanced over at Ethan, who had fallen asleep during the ride. He smiled, a deep sense of gratitude washing over him. The future was still uncertain. But with Ethan by his side, David knew one thing for sure. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. And so, under a sky full of stars, David gently carried his sleeping son inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Ethan's courage, his determination to do what was right, didn't just save his father, it changed everything. His voice sparked a reckoning that reached far beyond their home. He reminded an entire community, and perhaps all of us, that bravery has no age, and that love and honesty must always come first. If Ethan's story moved you, be sure to subscribe for more inspiring and heartfelt tales. And before you go, what would you have done in Ethan's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.